I'm Mel.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Beck, and this is We Are Woman.
When we talk about power, it's often vague. It's a word we throw around without ever really asking what it means. So before we go anywhere today, we want to slow this right down because power isn't a mindset. It isn't confidence. It isn't dominance or independence. To us, power is the ability to stay connected to yourself, to your body, your truth, your inner signals, while being in relationship with the world. It's not about control, it's about capacity. And the way we know whether power is real or performative is by how it feels in the body. So today, we're exploring what power actually is, what it feels like when it's embodied, and how softness, boundaries, intuition, and expression aren't opposites of power, they're the way it moves, and how unclaimed power can lead to resentment. I'd love to begin with the felt sense of power and what power actually is for you both.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'm really, at least as a concept, I'm starting to really see that power really is our ability to act in the world, or our ability to act in the world and to follow through on my words, on my feelings, on my actions in a way that feels in integrity. And within that, for me, what I found in myself is it actually has a quite a clean, neutral tone as well as expression to it for me. And that is now I feel after 2.5 years of exploring that, like my own power also as one of the many themes that I've explored in breathwork, is that I feel like I now can sort of land in that position in a real true and real way. Obviously there's always work to do and many layers to explore, but it does feel, yeah, my power is quite embodied in that way. Whereas before I thought I had at least I had the perception that power meant competency in the world, and to a degree that still is, like I still agree with that, but I was almost overcompensating on that level, so almost through a form of performance and also pride, probably. Like there was a quality of pride that sat within that. And so I confused, for quite a long time, I confused power with this sort of prideful, boastful way of being in the world. And what I've really found in just my own process around there is that no, power is actually, it's actually more of a quality of quiet confidence and of leaning back a little bit more in life. It's probably how I would describe it more from a somatic point of view, leaning back and being more grounded in the body, as well as still open and receptive, but definitely not this kind of rushing, going toward kind of quality that I used to embody. So yeah, that's my current perspective on power.
I think it's quite similar actually in terms of the idea of what I thought power was. And actually, I think the realizations that it's not have only just started to come through for me, if I'm really honest. I've had this idea that power is about how much space I take up. And I
Mm,
don't mean sort of size-wise necessarily, but I think there's this sort of expectation maybe that for me, power was that sort of level of authority or demonstrating strength. And I think that that's quite common for women as well, to have this idea of what power looks like in terms of these sorts of big gestures
mm,
without the softness and the flow. And I think forgetting that we can hold both, we might feel like we have to choose between them, where in actual fact, we can learn to hold both that level of authority and that level of strength with softness and steadiness as well. So I think I'm similar to Sarah in just in terms of I didn't really I think my definition of power was a little bit, yeah, I think defined by conditioning. But what's really interesting, which Sarah shared with us a little bit earlier, was where the definition of power comes from. And I'm going to butcher the words, but it comes from the Latin potera, which is to be able to, and from Old French "pouvoir," which is, all my French friends are going to hate me for that. The ability, might, or authority. And I think what you explained to us, Sarah, that power is about capacity and the ability to act and influence and hold all of that. And so, what power now feels like for me has been really an unfamiliar feeling for a long time, because it's been almost a steadiness and a calm. And I've been looking for power because it felt almost too quiet in my body to really be anything. But I think that's what power is, right? And what I'm certainly learning is that level of sort of stillness, groundedness, calm, confidence, steadiness that actually speaks maybe a little bit quieter in our body.
Yeah, I can very much resonate with that last piece that you mentioned back around this quietness. And yeah, when I first sort of started touching on this, it almost felt like a bit of a void within myself, like a void where there was just kind of nothing. And I was like, surely that's not my power. But then I learned that sort of all the other mechanisms and strategies that I had built around myself through just my experience as being a human living life and being in the world, all these other strategies that I built around myself were actually ways to feel powerful, but they weren't actually real power. And when I started to, started to like reclaim my true power and also come into a deeper understanding that, is it really my power or is it nature's power? Is it something sort of beyond me, but yet within me, that I could somehow surrender to and actually let that sort of lead me, let that guide me, let that bring me into deeper layers of trust and safety and also confidence, actually, funnily enough, like really coming through this idea of the conditioning and all the patterns are really just ideas and are constructs of mind and of perception. And I had built a whole identity based off perceptions, which I think most people do, or what I know most people do. And yeah, moving through all the layers, and then at some point coming to this sort of void-like feeling where I was like, there seems to be nothing here. But then when I sort of started to move through that void, or within that void, so to speak, I noticed it wasn't actually a void. It was full of life force energy. It was full of nature. And I call it nature. You can call it spirit, you can call it divinity, you can call it breath. Yeah. But when I started to really connect to my breath in through breath work as well, was actually my power. And it is something unspoken. It's something that's very difficult to name or even talk about, because it is so innate and it's actually so normal. I think we sometimes look for concepts outside of ourselves, but actually when we really start to really unpack it, it's so normal and so natural. And for me, what I found with power, but I guess also with some other topics or concepts, but yeah, because we're talking about power today, is that it's not my will, but it's sort of like thy will, or it's will, if you will, and they can merge somehow. They can co-create, and my will can become nature's will, and they can somehow align together. And what I found was I was not aligning my will with nature's will for a very long time, because I had the idea that I would literally die, actually, that something would go terribly wrong if I would let go of control in that way. And so I'd also confused power with control. Yeah, and I think control is probably a mechanism that most of us can relate to one way or another, probably in very different ways. But yeah, I'm curious to hear about your story, Mel.
Yeah, thanks so much. I feel, yeah, like this is a really juicy topic for me right now. It's something that I am, yeah, in the process of probably working through. And I think, if I'd heard us speaking to power like a quietness or a void, in the past, I would have been like, what? It's like effort. It's like it's functioning. It's holding together. It's like it requires energy. That's power. And some of our listeners may feel that now or have felt that before, and that's totally okay because I can feel that I'm in that process where I am finding a quieter power and I am quiet. It feels to me like a solidness or a stability in myself. And I can quite often, if I relate it to my body, it can quite often feel like a really relaxed front state of my body, but I can feel my spine. And that feels like power. And it's just a bit softer. And yeah, it's not an energy, it's not a function like it used to be. So yeah, I love that there's this idea that we can go from, yeah, like an effort and a function to more of a quiet way, and that's power. Like that's where it is. And it really would have tested my mind to think of it that way, in the past, but I'm beginning to understand what that actually feels like, looks like, or even what my thoughts are. So yeah, really appreciate you bringing in that softness to power.
And isn't it funny though, Mel, as you describe that? Because I think, as you said, I wouldn't be surprised if at least 90% of people can relate to that being their definition of power. But
Mm.
when I stop to think about it and what that's looked like for me in practice, there are points where I've tried to step into that. And as you know, I'm generally quite softer, more gentle person. There was a time in my career where I was working with a leader who told me I needed to be more assertive. So, so I went and wrote this really assertive email to someone and then came back and my boss pulled me up for being aggressive. And it was like here I was trying to be this version of power, what I thought power needed to be. And it didn't look nice. It didn't fit well on me. It's only when I go back to those spaces where I can sort of ground into myself. Even when I think we've spoken about this before, if I'm facilitating for a big group of people, what I notice is there's a softness in me in that moment. I feel completely at home, but there's also a softness, a steadiness that comes in. And I think maybe that links into our nervous system when we're able to be with what comes up, whatever that is. So I don't think necessarily in breath work we find power through expressions of power. So to speak, maybe we find power through crying for for an hour or whatever that looks like. But being able to stay with what's there, and when our nervous system feels safe enough to stay and be with what's there, regardless of what comes up, regardless of the circumstances. That's power. That's where we get, as you said, we move from that one definition to the other.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really interesting to think that these I suppose these powers that we speak to are returning to the feminine as well. These powers that, we probably more used to think of, I suppose, in terms of masculine, in that effort, in that performance, in you writing assertive emails or, bringing power and really pushing it. But our power is in the feminine, in the softness, speaking our boundaries, and it doesn't necessarily have to be aggressively. It's strong, but it can be soft. And then yeah, our expression, our intuition, it's coming back. And this is, what this podcast is all about, returning to the feminine. And the feminine powers seem to, it seems to be just, yeah, that's where the flow is for us.
Yeah. Thank you, Mel. Yeah, I love that. And
Mm.
just just want to add some nuance and some extra bits to that as well, where I feel we are I think as a collective we are returning to the feminine just because it's been suppressed for a while.
Mm,
Yeah, so we are returning to the feminine, but we are as much also returning to the true masculine, I feel.
yes. I love when
Because
you talk about this. Go, Sarah.
because true power lives within both our masculine and our
Yes.
feminine expressions of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if we sometimes do need to be assertive because the situation requires that, or if we just feel that within ourselves, then we can act upon that.
Mm,
And if we feel the situation requires softness and more of a nurturing quality, then we can also act upon that. And I feel the true power sits actually in the ability to do both, and
mm,
the ability to choose and express in the way that we feel like in the moment. And I want to add to that that often what I have seen, and to your point, Mel, is that because our systems and our societal structures are more structural and organized, and that in of itself is more of a masculine expression, right? Just structure, choose stability kind of thing. Like there's all these kind of like rules of like what's the right way and what's the wrong way, and it's more masculine, and it's very useful. It's very meaningful in so many ways. And also, what we've lost in that is maybe more of a flowing capacity and a capacity to just go with the flow more and also trust nature more. I think that is actually one of the big pieces we've really lost in our modern society, is that we don't, at least I know for myself, when I did some like camping trips by myself in the bush because of this reason, because I felt this within myself, was like I didn't actually trust nature. And when I started to see that in myself, I was like, that's a bit strange. I am essentially nature. I come from nature. Why don't I really trust myself in nature? Like I had this like perception that something would go wrong if I would spend 5 days by myself in nature. Or like if everything goes to shit and I would just be me and nature, I would somehow not be able to do that, which is probably still true because I'm still lacking the tools and skills to actually do that. But I challenged myself when I went on some camping trips by myself in nature, and it really helped me to reestablish this trust in nature. And I believe that is more maybe meld to what you're speaking to, the feminine, and starting to trust that the feminine and nature is safe and that we are held. And then the structures of the masculine can still be there to hold containment on some level and allow the energies to flow in particular directions. And also, we have this more feminine expression within ourselves that we maybe actually are also now safe to really start to explore, and that we are feeling held. And that we also, and this was a big piece for me, that I actually believed that I could just receive. And I believe now, with the work that I've done on just receiving as a woman, is that actually me in my beingness, that is power in and of itself, instead of in my doingness. Honestly, I felt like I was a human doing rather than a human being. And
mm,
that now I can actually held by something greater than me, or something that I am really, and that I can just surrender more, and not fully. This is still work in progress. That is also power. And that was really terrifying for me, like actually terrifying for me to actually let go in that way and start to surrender to more of this kind of what I spoke to earlier, more of this divine, I guess this divine will, and actually start to trust more the universe, and not needing to feel like I need to do it all myself, and me and my own little self trying to survive in the world.
I think as I'm listening to you, one thing I'm hearing is when we might realize our gap. So for me, initially, my boss was like, hey, you got to pick up this authority, this assertiveness. And for you, maybe going the other way into that more feminine side, what we can do at times maybe is almost, because it's not our most comfortable place to play, go all the way in there, get it a
mm,
little bit wrong, and then find, once we've explored that, when we then move into a place where we're bringing both together and we're utilizing the best of both in order to be in power. That's where we get into true power. But for anyone listening, and it might be different for all of us, to be able to explore, where am I most comfortable? Where do I need to test myself a little bit? In that testing, we might go all the way. We might go into, just manifesting as a into and that space, and then realize, oh yeah, I actually need to do the work in order to manifest as well, and bring it back. So yeah, I really love this conversation because it really talks to why we have these polarities and why they're so important, and how they hold each other.
I love that, Beck. I know that. So how my power journey, I suppose we could call it, started was, I know that I kept quiet. I people pleased, and I'm sure a lot of listeners will be able to resonate with this. I kept quiet, tried to keep my needs sort of like, well, I didn't have needs, and then I sort of woke up to this and I was like, why am I doing this? So I charged full ball in my power. I was like, I'm saying no to everybody. I'm never doing things I don't want to do ever again. And I charged right through to that stage. And then I went through that stage, which felt great, and it was a full rebellion. But then I was able to come back, more so into the middle, which I think, which maybe, is that quietness. And look, it's still a journey, but that's where I'm touching into more of that quietness, and potentially what we're bringing up here is a bit more of a balance. Like, yeah, we need to be able to, yeah, flow between each, like the so-called feminine power into the masculine power, and just have a bit of, yeah, balance and flow through that, and what's needed and what's not needed at the time. And then also being able to just be in that, yeah, that stillness of, and that balance. So yeah, that's what my journey looked like.
Yeah, I think maybe we can continue to evolve the conversation, but if I think about everything that we've been saying, it's not that power is that tightening of our grip and the control that you mentioned earlier on, Sarah. It's more the expansion, and maybe widening our capacity to hold all of those and to be really grounded in it.
Yeah, I love all of this. And yeah, the way I often translate this into physiology and into breath is that, for example, we can see the expression. We're talking about masculine and feminine energies as we explore power, which is super fascinating that we came to this. But if we look at masculine and feminine energies in the body, and we look at the inhale is more of a masculine quality. It has more of an activation quality. It brings more oxygen into our lungs. So we get to activate, we get to act, we get to be potentially assertive or do something in the world, yeah, with our inhale. Then our exhale represents more of maybe that feminine quality. So more of the relaxation, the letting go, the surrendering, and the flowing. Yeah. And what we can start to map as practitioners of FBR breathwork, we can start to map this in physiology, people's relationship to their own masculine and feminine energies based on the inhale versus exhale ratio. So if, for example, even if it's a tiny microsecond, but if the inhale is consistently a little bit bigger than the exhale, let's say, as an example, what is going to happen over time? Well, if the inhale is always a little bit bigger than the exhale, just because that is habituated within our system, there's going to be just a little bit more capacity for activation than for relaxation. What that is going to mean over time is probably that it's going to be accumulative, so it's going to propel upon itself. And what that means is that this individual, which inhale is consistently bigger than the exhale, is going to probably have more capacity in their activation capacity, in their more masculine yang kind of qualities, which is more of the doing activation mode, and probably less capacity in their ability to also relax and downshift and surrender and let go. Now, in some people, it's the other way around, right? So we get to see in breathwork, we get to see this really beautiful connection between our own relationship to the masculine and the feminine, and therefore also we can encounter then our own shadows around power. So for some people, that might be not speaking up enough and not being assertive enough. Yeah, like we kind of discussed before. And for some people, that might mean actually, let's drop this whole performance act and start to relax a little bit more. And maybe that's real rediscovering of their real power. And in that, we often need to also encounter a variety of shadows, kind of like power that's been hidden in the shadow. And that could be chronic anxiety, that could be irritability, could be yes, gut discomfort. That was a real big one for me, just not being connected to my gut at all. Fatigue, but also things like over or under expression of power, kind of like we already spoke about. Like there can be too much anger or frustration or aggression, or almost not enough, where we can't say no or can't put boundaries into place. And all of these nuances we can explore in breath work. And this is why I love this technique so much, because we get to actually explore and really pull apart, not only on a mental level, but actually on an embodied level, what power really is and what it really feels like in the body.
I think this technique in particular, FBR, allows you to do that in a way that is so safe. Because I remember before I was working with FBR, I was working with other types of conscious connected breathing, and the inhale and the sort of force of the inhale was really creating some terror in my body. Whereas now I've been able to explore that because of the style of breath work, I think FBR, while still using conscious connected breathing, is so much less efforting to other styles of conscious connected breathing. So you can explore that and explore the noticings of where your breath lands and whether there's a microsecond here or a microsecond there, in a way that is so gentle and keeps the awareness. Whereas previously, when I was working with other styles of breath work, the terror it created meant I couldn't stay with it.
Most practitioners aren't so practiced also enough to actually recognize these nuances in the body. And I think that makes the technique of FBR also really quite unique, is that all the practitioners that have been trained with FBR have a really deep and complex understanding of the nervous system, the endocrine system, and can actually really read the breath mechanics, which really makes all the difference when we want to facilitate true and genuine change. Kind of to your point back, some of us don't need more effort. We are efforting enough, we don't need more of that. And if we're going to do a breathwork practice that's going to add more effort, we're just going to deepen our pattern into that. And that's what I love about this technique. To your point back, is that because it's so balanced and nuanced, and because it has such a beautiful and good integration of masculine and feminine, we get to actually come into what does true power really feel like in the body, and how do I really reclaim it in a way that feels super safe and not pushy or forceful. Yeah.
I think that was one of the biggest things that drew me to this practice, to FBR breathwork, and you'll probably hear us speak to this across our episodes, but the science meeting the technique as well. Like this is grounded in what we do, and there's different systems reacting, and power can show up in breath mechanics. It can show up in, the changes to the color of the face and things like that, and just those small details. And that's what I love about this practice, that there's a science behind it, and we are trained in watching all those systems work together. And then, it blows my mind that power can just show up on so many different levels, in a body. And and that creates the safety in exploring something like power as well.
Can I ask you, Mel? Well, I'd love to ask both of you actually. What have you noticed in your journeys where you've been most in your power? Has it been big expressions of power, or have other things come up for you?
Ooh, this is a great question for me. I've definitely explored big expressive power, so I have had the noise activation, and I've had really like big movements in my body. But for me, my truest exploration of the power has been really staying with myself in softness. And that speaks to, that we've referred to power as that capacity to be with yourself, or the ability to be with what's coming up. That's true power. And my biggest exploration has been, staying with myself in softness and in those more feminine qualities. Previously in the past, had I felt into that, or I'd felt into my body changing into softness or something, I would pull myself out and I would, bring back those more, bigger, confident, effortful displays of power. But now being able to safely explore my own softness and my own vulnerability through my body and through breath work, that is my biggest learning, actually. Yeah. Thanks, Beck.
Yeah, I love that. What about you, Sarah?
Oh, I find it such a difficult question, or as in I love the question, but I find it difficult to answer because I feel as I look at the concept of power, I look at it almost through the chakra system. So my relationship to the different chakras within my own self has changed as I explored power through all of the different systems in different expressions. So, for example, I think the biggest one for me really was around really deeply breathing into the pelvis and into the root chakra and feeling really safe in the world and feeling really held. Like I kind of spoke to before, but feeling really held by nature and by the world and just feeling super, super safe in that. And that brought up a whole, when I started moving into that, kind of like similar to Mel, like it just brought up so much fear actually going into that because I didn't trust that it was going to be safe, that I was actually going to be held. I had this felt, it wasn't just a belief system in my mind, it was a felt belief that if I let go in that way and I actually allow myself to be held by the world, that I will not survive. Like something terrible is going to happen. And I say that from someone that hasn't had a lot of trauma in their childhood or anything like that. So I found that quite fascinating, actually, that, I work with a lot of PTSD and complex PTSD. And it's like kind of like, yeah, okay, that's obvious that you don't feel safe in the world. But I think most of us don't really feel truly deeply safe in the world when we really start to touch on it. So I think my true and deepest exploration around my power was actually just feeling really safe in the world, and that feeling really powerful because I just felt so safe. And that was really coming into the root chakra, but so as well I think the sacral chakra, which is around creativity and pleasure and sexuality and emotional expression, was a really big exploration for me as well, with actually feeling again safe and powerful to express my sexuality in a way that is very true and aligned for me, and that I don't need to hold it back because it's somehow too much for others, or that it's somehow weird, or just too much, pretty much. Like that was, I guess that was my narrative that I built around that. And so feeling really, really safe in and powerful in my desires, and feeling like I can trust my desires and my instinct of not only my sexual desires, but just my desires in life. How do I want to live my life? What do I want to create in the world? All of those things. And then I think the third one, I'm just naming, I think the third one for me was in the heart space. So the heart chakra, which was really finding a really healthy balance between giving and receiving love. I believe that I needed to give more in order to be worthy of receiving love. And what I found through the exploration of my heart space was more around really finding power also in the we space, in the relational space. For some reason, I had in my mind that I need to be a strong individual and one single authority. Well, for some reason, I mean, it's pretty obvious with the Western conditioning. If we look at what most of us have been taught around, like, you need to be independent and and then you're really powerful. At least that was the story that I was told, right? So I became really good at being very independent. And I really needed to learn to rely on others again and actually be like, hey, actually, I need others in my life. Yeah, I can hold myself. And I think that's important as a human being, that we come to a stage in our life where we feel like we can hold ourselves with a healthy level of authority, which in and of itself is powerful. And then also make the next step into more interdependence, which is like yeah, really into I'm holding you and you're holding me, and we're actually needing each other in that. And it's not actually an icing on the cake, it's an actual need. And for me to start to actually admit that to myself was a huge step in coming actually more into a deeper power and trust within myself, but then also like on some level I felt like I was giving my power away, but in that I found my power. So yeah, those three are the biggest themes for me. What about you, Beck?
Yeah, I really like listening to this. I loved you talking about that sort of grounded first chakra breath because that's been part of my practice is to try and expand that space and grow breath into that space. So that is my plan for tomorrow, actually. After I've held space for everyone else, I've carved out a couple of hours to really just breathe into that space tomorrow as well. But yeah, I think two things. One has been getting breath into those first three chakras and being able to feel the breath in there, not the sort of wispy little bit of nothing in there, but actually being able to feel that against something. And then, yeah, the heart space as well, softening into, and I suppose the willingness, yeah, just to be there with whatever comes up. And I think when we were all in Bali together, I had just about got to that place. And by the end, I was a broken person because I'd been in that place so much over the 2 weeks. But I hadn't explored that before and it had not felt safe. But I mean, I was a mess, but I felt powerful to allow it, which was really beautiful. So yeah, the heart space has been really big for me. And then just as a facilitator, something that I've really noticed with people that I've been working with is the power of touch on someone's hand. So not just sort of the opening up their hand, but just that lingering touch on someone's hand and how things change after that moment in a breathwork journey. So yeah, I've been really exploring that with some of my clients who initially found it maybe a little bit, their protectors were really strong, and just the power of a handhold and how that has been able to loosen protectors for people.
You know, Beck, as you speak to that, I'm probably nuancing actually what you're saying, but what came up for me was, and look, I mentioned it before too. I said that my truest power has been in sitting with myself in softness. But I would really then now just like to bring in how beautiful this technique is, FBR breathwork, when you want to access your power and you want to feel what that feels like in your body. And if you want to feel, yeah, like that fire in your body, you can. We have facilitations to do that. We have power moves, we can meet, we as facilitators can meet you there with that. We've got compression techniques and we've got pressure techniques. And it's like, how good does it feel when you do have a journey where you can also access that real body power, that physical power, and someone's pushing against you, helpfully, usefully, or you can roar. Like sometimes that's power too, right? And that feels so good. And I mentioned before that that was sort of my first exploration of power. So I don't want to write that off either. Like, yes, my power has been in sitting with the softness, but also I had to access that full, I guess it feels primal power. I had to access that and bring it in. And yeah, I'm getting all excited even when I'm talking about this. I can feel it in my body and I want to push against something. Like that feels good too, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Just how amazing then is being able to, as someone who might have felt powerless for much of their lives, to start to explore their power through a
Mm,
modality like breathwork, but in
hmm
particular, this style of, or any, but obviously we love FBR, this style of facilitated breathwork because
mm.
as I said, I practiced other styles of breath work before this, and I can't imagine getting to where I've got to without the facilitation. It's such an important part of what we
Mm,
do, and this practice, the fact that someone can see and be with us and notice and respond to what's happening in order to guide us safely to where we might want to explore even further. I think there is something so special and so unique for anyone who might have felt out of their power or powerless for so long to be able to use
mm.
a modality like this to explore power.
And it really, we say all is welcome. It's all welcome. And you know, and if you're someone potentially reclaiming that power to do that in front of others, or at least a facilitator, and then it's welcome, and not be shamed for that. It's like, yeah, bring it. We've got this. Let's do this. Like equally whether it be, you know, the big loud form of power or the softness as well. Like you are held in that and it's all okay.
I love this conversation and where it's going, and I love to speak into a fairly recent realization that I had for myself, which is that the self really arises out of our relationship with others. And so any form of either empowerment or disempowerment is only there in the face of others. So kind of like speaking to this concept that you guys are speaking to around the way we heal that is through relationship. And we actually therefore need others to reflect back to us whether we are maybe too much in our power,
Mm,
and actually overpowering or dominating in some way, or too little. And so we learn through others as well about ourselves and to in different groups. And that's why I'm so excited to be also facilitating more women's circles and women's groups, because of this idea that we really arise out of our relationship with others. And what I found is that I held a lot of mixed containers as well, men and women in a group, or only females in a group. And there's something particularly uniquely healing about sitting in circle with women, because I noticed for myself, and I've had many conversations with other women, and they've shared this with me as well, is that there's so many biases and ideas around actually feeling and fears around actually feeling safe in sisterhood. This is a
mm,
thing, like to feel safe amongst our sisters and to feel also therefore powerful within ourselves to be just as we are, and that we feel we can express ourselves in a variety of different ways. We can both be in our power and in our masculine if we want to be that, and also in our feminine if we want to be that. And so I'm really excited bringing more sister circles also to this podcast, and as we start to expand the conversations, would love to hear other perspectives as well, because we get to learn so much through your perspectives as well,
mm,
as through this conversation of power. Maybe exploring for yourself as an invitation as to what do you feel like is your, what are you really good at in terms of your power? Like, where do you feel like you're just thriving and it comes really natural? That could be one. And then the other one could be, where do you feel like you could, you're either overcompensating, so you're maybe being boastful, prideful, or a bit dominant maybe in some ways, or kind of over controlling in different ways, or whether you feel like you can step up a little bit more and you can assert your boundaries a bit more fully. And both of those are valuable. And I just want to speak to that to really feel powerful and safe in sisterhood is a whole practice of its own, where we really learn that we don't have to shrink in someone else's power, and also we don't have to dominate in the face of someone else's power. And can we all feel really fully powerful within ourselves as well as within one another? And for me, that's really a hope and an inspiration for this podcast as well, is that we can start to see that, because power can sometimes feel dominating, or it can feel a bit scary, or not dominating, sorry, intimidating is the word rather. And when we see that in others, we can feel intimidated. But what a beautiful opportunity to step into something, right? So yeah, I'm inviting this lens of power is something we can explore, yes, within ourselves, within an individual session, with an individual practitioner, but then also within circles. And that's where we really start to understand the nuance of this energy of power. Like where I know for myself, I was sometimes kind of just a little bit my chin up, a little bit above the other, just a little bit, or the other way around. And it's just all these subtle ways to just make myself feel more powerful. And I just started to really nuance that and notice that for myself. And I was like, that's not actually really authentic. And so I think coming back to this idea of circle and coming into circle really helps us to understand, yeah, the deeper meaning of power and what it really feels like and looks like.
You spoke to trust before, Sarah, and I think that such a big part of this concept of power is that courage and faith and letting go and trusting. And being in a circle really helps facilitate that in a way, I think that is different to one, as you described. I certainly found it very overwhelming to come into circles with a lot of people. And the styles of breath I was doing before, there were lots of people. And it was confronting, and that wasn't very nice. But I think the way we do it in FBR, where there are so many facilitators for the amount of breathers, and as you described, having even women's circles as well, it offers this space to be able to really go into power as a form of trust and courage and almost having that faith as you described earlier. So I'm not, probably sounds like I'm rubbishing other styles of breath work. This is just my experience. So I'm not, I want to make that clear as well. But certainly I've felt that the FBR circles have become such a safe way to explore that.
Yeah, I think the circles, even for my journey and when we facilitated others, I think there's such a beautiful moment when someone can find their power in a group, in circle, and to experience what that feels like to have that power in amongst people. But and also I have current clients at the moment who can access their power quite comfortably in a one-to-one, but still the work is to be able, when I say one-to-one, I mean just, yeah, like one facilitator, one breather. Their work is still to be able to express in circle, or it doesn't come quite online when we come together in circle. So, I mean, potentially there's room to, explore it in both, yes. But I do think the process of finding your power within a circle is something that I know for myself personally has been a really big part of my journey, and I love it when I see that in others as well.
Yeah. I think what's important to also speak to is this work is not for the faint-hearted. It's absolutely safe and absolutely, like, I find it very supportive, and particularly the way we also as a school, as a breathwork school, the way we teach and the way we hold also the principles around. So we have one facilitator on 5 breathers as a max. So we only have 5 breathers on one facilitator. We can't go over that. And that is for safety reasons and for effectiveness reasons. But yeah, really making sure that everyone feels safe to explore themselves, because it's within safety that we feel we can express these deeper parts of us or explore these deeper parts of us. And just speaking to kind of like we need, like, yes, it like Mel, you kind of spoke to, it feels so good to raw and just let that primal energy out and so on, and I love that so much as well. That's been so much fun to actually to just let that out, and to have the spaces where that is normalized, actually, because it is, okay, if someone does that on the street, it's maybe a little bit strange, but it's also a bit strange, actually, that we're all walking around so contained. Like, you can look at that as that's also a bit strange, right? And then also recognizing certain things are appropriate in certain social settings and certain things just aren't, right? But yeah, what I love about the spaces, about the circles we create, is that there is an opportunity to explore, as you spoke to before, back the full spectrum. And what that sometimes means is that we need to go into rage or anger or terror or shame or and I say sometimes, but actually almost always, to be honest. Like if we want to really reclaim a deep and true part of ourselves, we need to encounter the shadow side of that. We need to encounter that which was suppressed, which is, if we look at it in a very simple and true way, simply unconscious energy that is just needing to be felt still. It just hasn't been seen. And but because we haven't done that for a while, it can feel very scary and it can feel very overwhelming. And I want to speak to that because I think it's important that that is also present. And so you want to kind of be ready for it. And also the facilitators can hold you in that in a very safe and contained way, as well as I really believe that we will be shown what we are ready to see and feel. I just believe the human psyche and the body works like that. I don't think we will really see anything before we are on some level ready to see it. And what we get to do in these practices is that we get to walk this path consciously and with choice, which in and of itself can be very empowering. So yeah, really inviting all of you into the spaces with us as we start to expand this and build more women's circles and really start to see ourselves in truer expressions of ourselves, which is actually really vulnerable, but also very powerful.
The feeling afterwards of holding all of that, it's nothing I've felt before. To have been so deep in something and come out the other side, having witnessed all of that in me. These circles are amazing.
I think it's also super exciting as well to be in a place here where we can offer, like, come in and find your power, whatever that looks like. Like, come to circle and like let's just find what it is. And it's going to be different for every person. Every listener upon listening to this episode may have more of an idea now of where their power is or where it's lacking, but bring that all in and it's all welcome. And we can go there, and just to have a place and a space to offer that feels super exciting, even just from a point of view as a facilitator to the circles.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we say it's all welcome, because this is like a kind of like a little phrase that we use in Breathwork Bali, Breathwork Byron, and also Breathwork Sydney, we really mean that, because all of our facilitators are trained to look through the lens of whatever we are opening up in someone, whether that is big movements, big power expressions, deep exploration of sexuality, creativity, intimacy, love, fear, joy, all of these different layers. We are also trained and we are looked through the lens of like whatever we open up, we are also willing to hold. So if I'm opening up, so let's say someone into their power with their consent, obviously, and their willingness to go there, I am also simultaneously willing to hold someone in their deepest rage or anger, because that's what I'm signing up for as a practitioner. And I guess I'm just clarifying that because it can sound a bit cheesy, like, yeah, all of you is welcome here, but we really mean that in the sense of what we are opening up with you, we are willing to hold with you. And I think that's just really important to know deep within, that if I'm not going to open it up, and that's kind of like a vow that I made to myself, I'm not going to open something up in someone that I'm also not willing or maybe able to hold, right? And I'm really true and honest with myself around that as a practitioner, because I want to be honest with the people that I work with around this. And so, yeah, in our practitioner trainings and in the circles that we hold, we share this principle as well. We share this with everyone that goes through the training of like, that is a lens you want to look through. So I'm emphasizing that so that you guys, you girls, you women feel very met in that, in a real and honest way. And it's not just some like cheesy sort of phrase that we have. It's like a real promise that we've made as practitioners.
Yeah, I like also to bring in, and it's something that played out for me. So it's not necessarily going to play out for everybody, but there will be some people that can resonate on that. It's also that nothing's too much. And quite often where we can take a breather, but where we can go with someone, we've been ourselves, and to just really be honest and say, hey, I've raged in a breath journey before. I've cried in a breath journey before. Like I've been there too. And so that's okay. Like there's not a too muchness there as well.
We can also look at power through the stages of development. So as a human being, as we grow up and mature in life, we go through several stages of development. And I think it is important to just look at how do these stages develop, and where do their potential shadows or blockages occur, and how do we then work with that in breathwork? Yeah, how do we recognize it and how do we work with it? So just a really brief overview of what power feels and looks like in early development. So if we just look at an infant, so from 0 to 2 years old, the core experience of power is through the lens of autonomy versus shame and doubt. Yeah, so this is a very baseline that everything else is built on. Oh, and by the way, this model is from Erikson's Stages of Development. So that's where I'm drawing the information from. And this is really what creates an important foundation of agency and trust in the world. So this is really, I have an impact, my needs matter, and I belong here as a child on this planet. That's sort of the idea and the imprint that happens at this very early stage of 0 to 2. I can act, I am safe, I'm safe in the world. Yeah. Now, the shadow side of it is neglect or inconsistent care or shaming. So the child may suppress natural impulses, and that can often lead to low power or confidence, or kind of like this passive aggressive kind of behavior. And just a nuance before we go into the other stages, it is very common for most of us to have some form of shadow in each stage. That is actually quite common just for the human experience. And so you might notice yourself resonating with some of these parts, and it doesn't necessarily directly reflect like childhood trauma as such. It's small t trauma, but it doesn't have to be pathologized either. Like it's really quite common that all of us have on some level some parts of us that feel unintegrated in this way. Cool. So the next stage is then early childhood. So that's from the age from 2 to 5. And this is where the core experience is in initiative. So taking initiative versus feeling guilty. Yeah. And this is where we also really start to test our no. So we really start to test our no often against our or with our caregivers. So we start to say no. Now, what can happen if the no isn't honored? Yeah, the child might learn that expressing power is unsafe, and that might then lead to either resentment or kind of people-pleasing kind of qualities. This can happen because the no is just not honored, because it's just ignored, or it can actually be an overcritical or harsh kind of way of a parent or caregiver responding to that. So in this stage, what is really important is that the child learns that they can affect their environment without fear or punishment. And so just notice as we walk through these stages if there might be parts of you that feels like, actually, I don't maybe fully feel like I can affect my environment, so put influence out in the world without fear or punishment in some way. Really useful to map this for yourself. Then we go to the next phase, which is middle childhood, which is from the age from 6 to 12. And here the core experience is of competence versus inferiority. So if we have a healthy development in this stage, we feel quite competent in the world, we feel capable, we feel a healthy sense of authority. If for some reason something has happened in these stages of our life, we can feel small or inferior in some ways. So this is where also power really starts to emerge often in a more social groups. So school, friendship, skill building, and problem solving is a really big part of that. So our circle starts to expand here to not only our caregivers or our direct family, also school environments. And this is really where the child discovers their ability to influence outcomes. So that's the main difference here, is that they can start to really see how they can influence the outcome of certain actions being taken. So this then kind of start to affect their leadership quality, and how they understand that taking one step in a particular way can lead to certain other steps and can lead to certain outcomes. And this is where self-esteem also get built, because they can understand, if I do X, Y, Z, this will kind of happen. It can create a lot of confidence in someone if that happens in a very useful, harmonized way. If it's over-controlled or undervalued, children may internalize, I'm not capable, like as a limiting beliefs, and the adult version of that thing can struggle with self-doubt, indecision, or feeling powerless in one way, shape, or another. And again, these are not complete statements. Like maybe a really big part of you feels like you're very capable and powerful, but another part of you has self-doubt, right? And so we're just speaking to the parts that might arise in this. Now, the next stage and the last stage of really sort of how this shows up in development is adolescence, which is from the age of 12 to 18. This is the core experience of this stage is identity formation. So we really start to create an identity around us and who we are versus role confusion. So this is where we can also start to get really confused maybe with a particular role or who we think we need to be or play. How power emerges in this stage is through autonomy from caregivers, social influence, sexual identity. So this is where we obviously start to explore our sexuality. And also our moral reasoning is a really big part of this. So our sense for morality in the world. And this is where the importance of this stage is where a teenager or adolescent finds their internal authority. So they really learn how to assert themselves, how to also negotiate effectively, maybe in a conversation or in a discussion, and how to also claim their personal boundaries in more of a nuanced kind of way. So there's more nuance that starts to come in here. Now, the suppression or the shadow of this stage can be a suppressed identity or bullying. It can result in resentment, difficulty setting boundaries, or a fear of stepping into leadership. So as you can see, each stage is very important for our development as human beings. And as breathwork practitioners, we hold these different developmental stages in mind as we work with the client. And when someone presents a topic to us, or when you might present a topic to us, that we can often hear where it might originate from. And we might just have a conversation around it. And often the person themselves says, well, when I was 5, XYZ happened, and it kind of becomes a bit more obvious. But then we overlay this, for example, with also the chakra system. And then also we start to recognize breath mechanics. It can be a really powerful way to reclaim different parts of our power again that may have been lost through these various developmental stages. So yeah, like I think what we're also bringing in with this idea of power is that it can be super nuanced, and some parts of us might feel very powerful and healthy and very healthily integrated and expressed, and some parts of us don't. So it's not black and white. We get to explore the variety of nuances of this energy of power within ourselves and how it can either show up or lack thereof. And so yeah, really, this could be a beautiful just moment for inquiry for yourself. What might have resonated from what was just shared around the developmental stages of power and how important it is for children to assert their boundaries and to let them also do that on some level. And yeah, what might quote unquote go wrong, and therefore what needs to then be readjusted later on. And like I said before, most of us have some, on each developmental stage, some themes to work through when it comes to power. And so that, I think, is the beautiful work that we're doing here, is we are really maturing as human beings. We are seeing that, and some of us are really recognizing that there's a part of me that's still a 4-year-old, and we just need to mature. And I also believe that with what's coming in the world right now with AI and all these kind of developments that are starting to happen in the world, is that it's really needed that we mature ourselves. So I see this work that we're doing of working on ourselves as so incredibly important, and probably one of the most powerful things we can really do for ourselves and for the rest of humanity, to reclaim what it means to be human, which isn't that our true power?
I really think this framework is super helpful to just be able to provide a lens for people who might be listening, who like the idea of exploring power, to then be able to find their own unique starting point. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I love this model as well. It brings so much nuance, and therefore more capacity for us to see clearly what needs to be integrated, which then leads to more power, doesn't it? Like when we can see what we're actually working on, that in of itself can be quite empowering.
If power has ever felt exhausting or heavy, it may not be because you're doing too much, but because you're performing something that was never meant to live in your head. True power lives in the body. It feels like breath moving freely, like sensation instead of bracing, like knowing when to open and when to close. When power is embodied, it feels soft without disappearing, clear without hardening, and expressed without force. So maybe the question isn't, how do I become more powerful? But what happens when I stop disconnecting from myself? That's where true power lives. So that's all from us today. Thank you so much for tuning in to We Are Woman. I hope today's conversation gave you something to reflect on, to feel into, or to carry with you into the rest of your week. Please make sure to click subscribe on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss the latest episodes as they drop. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a woman that would find it helpful, because this isn't just our podcast, it's all of ours, together. You can also follow us on Instagram at We Are Woman Podcast to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join our growing sisterhood. We've got some very special events planned and would love for you to be a part of them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being exactly who you are.